The meeting room on Nexus Prime Station felt like a tomb. Admiral Zektar looked around the circular table at faces filled with defeat. Some of those faces belonged to species he had never seen before this war started. Others belonged to old friends who had watched their worlds burn. The holographic display in the center showed the grim truth. Red markers covered most of the galaxy map. Each red dot meant the Vorthak Empire had conquered another system. The blue dots that showed free worlds were disappearing faster each day. "The Scythian crystal fleets are gone," said Ambassador Krillin, her crystalline body dimming with sorrow. 300 ships, all destroyed in the battle for Sigma 7. The Vorthak adapted to our plasma cannons in less than an hour. Admiral Zektar's forearms moved in the gesture his people used for deep sadness. He had known Krillin for 20 years. She had been proud and strong when they first met. Now she looked broken. The Aeroxy Gas Rider squadrons met the same fate, wheezed Commander Veltar through his breathing apparatus. His people lived in the thick atmospheres of gas giants. Their ships could move through space like fish through water. Our sonic weapons worked for exactly 43 minutes. Then the Vorthak ships changed. They absorbed our sound attacks and turned them back on us. The worst report came from Hive Mind Collective Unit 7. The insectoid creature's mandibles clicked as it spoke in perfect unison with its voice. Our swarm tactics failed. 1,000 small ships attacked as one mind. The Vorthak bioships learned our patterns. They predicted every move. Our entire fleet was destroyed without damaging a single enemy vessel. Admiral Zektar stood up slowly. His people were known for their strategic minds. They had helped win 3 major wars in galactic history. But this enemy was different. This enemy learned. "We have tried everything," he said to the assembled delegates. "Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological warfare, quantum disruptors, gravity bombs, antimatter missiles. Every weapon we use teaches the Vorthak how to defend against it. Every tactic we employ shows them how to counter it." Dr. Yilma, the galaxy's leading expert on adaptive technology, activated her personal hologram. The display showed a Vorthak bioship in battle. The alien vessel looked like a massive sea creature made of metal and flesh. As weapons hit it, the ship's surface changed and shifted. The Vorthak bioships contain millions of adaptation cells, Dr. Yilma explained. When hit by any attack, these cells analyze the weapon's energy signature, molecular structure, and delivery method. Within minutes, they develop immunity. Within hours, they can reflect the attack back at us. A young delegate from the Kepler colonies raised his hand. "What about the weapon types we haven't tried yet?" "There are none," Dr. Yilma said quietly. "We have used every form of energy known to science. We have tried every type of projectile, every chemical reaction, every exotic matter configuration. The Vorthak have adapted to all of them." The room fell silent. Outside the massive windows of Nexus Prime, ships from dozens of worlds hung in space. Most were refugee vessels filled with beings who had lost everything. A few were warships, but not enough to matter. Ambassador Krillin's crystal body brightened slightly. "What about the third arm of the galaxy, the region beyond the Barrier Nebula? Our long-range scanners have detected some activity there." Admiral Zektar considered this. The third arm was a mystery. Ancient space charts showed it existed, but no expedition had ever returned from that region. Most species assumed it was empty space or perhaps home to primitive civilizations. "We have no choice," he said finally. "If there is any hope left in this galaxy, we must find it, even if it means reaching out to complete strangers." Dr. Yilma worked quickly at her console. I can modify our most powerful communication array to send a message across the barrier nebula. It will take enormous energy, but we can do it." "What do we tell them?" asked Commander Veltar. "How do we explain our situation to beings we have never met?" Admiral Zektar thought for a moment. "We tell them the truth. We are dying. We need help. We will share all our knowledge with anyone who can save us." The next few hours passed in tense preparation. Every remaining ship in the free galaxy contributed power to the massive transmission array. Dr. Yilma and her team worked to compress their entire history, their science, and their desperate situation into a data package that could cross the vast distance. The message was simple, but complete. It contained star charts showing the Vorthak advance. It included technical specifications for every weapon they had tried. It showed the adaptation process that made the Vorthak invincible. Most importantly, it contained a plea for help from any civilization that might receive it. "Transmission ready," announced Dr. Yilma. Admiral Zektar looked around the room one last time. These might be the last representatives of free civilization in the galaxy. Their children might grow up as slaves to the Vorthak, unless someone out there could help them. "Send it," he ordered. The station's lights dimmed as massive amounts of energy poured into the communication array. The message burst forth like a dying star's last light. It raced across space toward the unknown regions beyond the barrier nebula. Then they waited. Commander Veltar floated near the window, watching the refugee ships. "How long until we know if anyone received it?" "If there is a civilization in the third arm, and if they have technology equivalent to ours, they should receive the message in 3 days, Doctor," Yilma replied. "A response would take another 3 days to reach us." "And if they have no technology at all?" asked Ambassador Krillin. "Then we wait to die," Admiral Zektar said quietly. The delegates began to disperse, returning to their ships and their people. Some would try to evacuate more civilians. Others would make final stands on their homeworlds. All of them carried the slim hope that somewhere in the dark reaches of space, someone had heard their cry for help. Admiral Zektar remained in the meeting room long after everyone left. He stared at the galaxy map with its sea of red markers. Tomorrow there would be more. The day after, even more. The Vorthak never stopped, never slowed, never showed mercy. But perhaps, just perhaps, someone was listening. Commander Jake Murphy was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the alert sounded. Deep beneath the Colorado Rockies, the Deep Space Monitoring Station hummed with quiet activity 24 hours a day. But the alarm that echoed through the corridors was one Jake had never heard before. He ran down the hallway to the main control room. Dr. Lisa Kane was already there, staring at multiple screens filled with data. Her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she worked at her console. "What do we have, Lisa?" Jake asked, settling into his command chair. "Long-range communication from the galactic core," she replied without looking away from her screens. "It's massive, Jake. This transmission used more energy than most stars put out in a month." Jake frowned. Humanity had been watching the galaxy for 200 years. They had seen the rise and fall of several civilizations. They had observed wars, first contacts between species, and the formation of the Great Galactic Alliance. But they had never seen anything like this. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The display filled with alien symbols, star charts, and what could only be battle footage. Ships that looked like living creatures fought against vessels of familiar design. The living ships won every battle. They absorbed attacks, changed shape, and struck back with the same weapons that had been used against them. My God, whispered Lieutenant Tom Harris from the communications station. "They're getting slaughtered." Dr. Kane translated the message as it scrolled past. "It's from something called the Galactic Alliance, multiple species working together. They're being destroyed by an enemy called the Vorthak Empire." Jake watched the footage with growing concern. The alien ships used energy weapons more advanced than anything Earth had developed. They fired beams that could cut through metal like butter. They launched missiles that exploded with the force of small suns, but none of it worked against their enemy. "These Vorthak ships adapt to every attack," Dr. Kane continued reading. "Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological warfare, quantum disruptors, everything becomes useless within minutes." "How long have they been fighting?" asked Jake. "According to this, the war has been going on for 57 years. The Vorthak have conquered most of the galaxy. This message is a desperate plea for help from anyone who might receive it." Jake stood up and walked to the large window that showed the mountain landscape above them. Somewhere up there, normal people were going about their normal lives. They had no idea that most of the galaxy was dying. "Sir?" Lieutenant Harris called out. "There's more. They're offering to share all their technology and knowledge with anyone who can help them. The technology of dozens of alien civilizations, faster-than-light travel methods humans had never imagined, energy sources beyond human understanding, medical advances that could cure every disease. It was the greatest treasure in the universe, offered freely in exchange for salvation." Jake turned back to his team. "Send a message to Washington, Priority Alpha. Tell them we need the President and the Global Defense Council in session immediately." "What? Do we tell them?" asked Dr. Kane. "Tell them the galaxy is dying and they want our help." The next 18 hours were the longest of Jake's life. Secure communications flew between world capitals. The President of the United States spoke with leaders from every major nation. Military commanders argued with scientists. Politicians debated with philosophers. The question was simple, but the answer was complex. Should humanity reveal itself to save strangers? Jake found himself in a video conference with people whose faces he had only seen on television. President. Helen Torres sat at the head of a long table in the White House Situation Room. Around her were generals, scientists, and leaders from allied nations. "Commander Murphy," President Torres said, "you've been watching these aliens longer than anyone. What's your assessment?" Jake looked at his notes. "Madam President, the Galactic Alliance represents at least 50 different species. They have technology centuries ahead of ours in most areas, but they're losing because their enemy adapts to everything they try." "And you think we might have something they don't?" asked General Patricia Stone from the Pentagon. "I think we might have something their enemy has never seen before," Jake replied. "These aliens have been fighting with energy weapons and advanced technology for thousands of years. The Vorthak adaptation system is designed to counter that kind of warfare." Dr. Kane joined the conversation from her station. "I've been analyzing the battle footage. The Vorthak bioships adapt by understanding the science behind each attack. They learn the energy frequency, the molecular structure, the physical principles. Then they become immune." "But what if we used weapons that don't rely on advanced science?" Jake continued. "What if we used simple, primitive technology that there's nothing complex to adapt to?" President Torres leaned forward. "You're talking about revealing humanity to an entire galaxy. Once we do that, there's no going back. We lose our secret. We lose our safety." "Madam President," said General Stone, "we're talking about a galactic empire that has conquered most of known space. If they defeat this alliance, how long before they find Earth anyway?" The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity should remain hidden and hope the Vorthak never found them. Others insisted that helping the Alliance was both morally right and strategically smart. Finally, President Torres called for a vote. The decision was close, but the result was clear. Humanity would emerge from the shadows. "Commander Murphy," the president said, "prepare a response to that message. Tell them help is coming, and God help us all if we're making a mistake." Jake returned to the control room with new orders. Dr. Kane and her team worked to compose a reply that would not reveal too much about human capabilities. They included basic information about Earth's location and their willingness to help. As Jake watched the message transmit across the galaxy, he thought about the enormity of what they were doing. For 2 centuries, humans had hidden in the darkness, watching other civilizations rise and fall. Now they were stepping into the light. "Think it will work?" asked Dr. Kane. Jake looked at the battle footage still playing on the screens. Magnificent alien ships being torn apart by living nightmares, entire civilizations reduced to refugee fleets, an enemy that seemed truly invincible. "It has to work," he said, "because if it doesn't, the galaxy dies, and eventually so do we." The message raced through space toward the dying civilizations near the galactic core. In 3 days, they would know if anyone was still alive to receive it. Captain Ryan Brooks had been in space for 6 weeks, and he was starting to hate the color black. His ship, the EAS Defiance, was painted to absorb light and hide from sensors. Every surface was designed to be invisible. Even the coffee cups were matte black. "Contact ahead," called Lieutenant Amy Davidson from the sensor station. "Looks like a Vorthak patrol." Ryan moved to the captain's chair and studied the display. 3 bioships drifted through the asteroid field like hunting sharks. Each ship was the size of a city block and covered with what looked like living armor. Tentacles and sensor arrays moved constantly across their surfaces. "Full stealth mode," Ryan ordered. "Let's see what these things can really do." The Defiance was humanity's most advanced reconnaissance vessel. It used technology borrowed from studying alien transmissions for 200 years, but it also used human innovations the aliens had never thought of. Simple things like heat sinks filled with ice and communication systems that used old-fashioned radio waves. Dr. Lisa Kane had insisted on coming along for this mission. She worked at a console filled with sensors and recording equipment. Every piece of data they gathered would help Earth prepare for what was coming. "I'm reading massive electromagnetic activity from the lead ship," she reported. "It's scanning the asteroid field with methods I've never seen before." "Are they detecting us?" asked Ryan. "I don't think so. Our stealth systems are based on principles their technology probably can't recognize." The 3 Vorthak ships moved deeper into the asteroid field. Suddenly, the largest ship fired what looked like a beam of pure energy. The beam hit a large asteroid and turned it into dust in seconds. "Impressive," muttered Lieutenant Davidson, "but we've seen energy weapons before." "Wait," said Dr. Kane, staring at her readings. "The ship is changing. Look at the hull near the weapon." Ryan focused the main viewer on the Vorthak vessel. The bioship's surface was shifting and growing. New structures appeared where there had been smooth armor before. The ship was literally rebuilding itself. "It's adapting to its own weapon," Dr. Kane said in amazement. "It fired an energy beam, then immediately developed better armor against that same type of energy. These things don't just adapt to enemy weapons, they adapt to everything." A new contact appeared on the sensors. A small alien fighter, probably a scout from one of the free worlds. The pilot was either very brave or very desperate to be flying. Alone in Vorthak space. "This should be interesting," said Ryan. The alien fighter opened fire with plasma cannons. Bright blue energy struck the nearest Vorthak ship. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. Pieces of bio-armor flew off into space. Then the Vorthak ship began to change. Its surface rippled like water. New armor grew where the old had been destroyed. But this armor was different. It had a blue tint that matched the plasma beams. The armor is absorbing the plasma energy, Dr. Kane observed. It's not just deflecting the attack, it's feeding on it. The alien fighter fired again. This time, the plasma beams were absorbed completely. The Vorthak ship grew brighter as it stored the energy. Then it fired the same blue plasma back at the fighter. The alien ship exploded in seconds. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Davidson. "No wonder they're winning this war." But Dr. Kane was studying something else. Her fingers flew over her console as she analyzed the recorded data. "Ryan, I think I see something. The adaptation process takes time. Maybe only a few minutes, but there's definitely a delay." "How long?" asked Ryan. "Based on this encounter, I'd say the bioship needed 4 minutes and 37 seconds to fully adapt to the plasma weapons. During that time, it was vulnerable." "That's not much time to win a battle." "No, but it's something, and there's more. Look at this energy signature analysis." Dr. Kane put her findings on the main screen. Complex charts and graphs showed how the Vorthak ship had processed the plasma attack. The adaptation system works by analyzing the energy patterns, molecular, structure, and physical principles of each weapon. It's incredibly sophisticated. "So?" asked Lieutenant Davidson. "So it might have trouble with weapons that don't have sophisticated science behind them. Look at these analysis patterns. The system is designed to understand advanced energy manipulation, exotic matter interactions, quantum effects. But what if we attacked with something really simple?" Ryan was beginning to understand. "You mean primitive weapons?" "I mean weapons so basic that there's nothing complex for the adaptation system to analyze. Chemical explosives instead of energy, beams, solid projectiles instead of plasma, simple physics instead of advanced science." The implications were staggering. The most advanced military force in the galaxy might be vulnerable to the most primitive weapons imaginable. Weapons that humans had been using for thousands of years. "We need more data," Ryan decided. "Amy, set course for the battle zone near Kepler's Gate. I want to see these things fight a real fleet." The Defiance spent the next week gathering intelligence. They watched battles between Vorthak forces and Alliance fleets. Each encounter followed the same pattern. The aliens would attack with their most advanced weapons. The bioships would adapt quickly and destroy them, but Dr. Kane noticed something in every battle. During those first few minutes, before adaptation was complete, the Vorthak ships took damage. Real damage. They could be hurt. They could even be destroyed if someone hit them hard enough, fast enough. "It's like fighting a learning computer," she explained to Ryan over dinner. "The computer gets smarter with every attack, but for a brief moment at the beginning, it's vulnerable. The problem is that these alien weapons are so advanced, the bioships learn from them too quickly," Ryan replied. "By the time the Alliance figures out what works, the Vorthak have already adapted. But human weapons are different. We use gunpowder. We use steel projectiles. We use simple chemical reactions. There's nothing sophisticated for the bioships to learn from." Ryan pushed his food around his plate, thinking. "You really believe a musket could hurt something that shrugs off antimatter missiles?" "I think 1,000 muskets fired at the same time might do more damage than 1,000 antimatter missiles. Because while the bioship is busy trying to figure out how to adapt to simple chemical explosions, We keep hitting it with more simple chemical explosions. The more Ryan thought about it, the more sense it made. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting ways to kill things with basic technology. Cannons, rifles, bombs, rockets. All of it based on simple principles that had worked for thousands of years. "Amy," he called to Lieutenant Davidson, "send a message to Earth. Tell them we need to talk to every military historian and weapons expert they can find. Also tell them to start making a list of every obsolete weapon in every museum." "Sir?" Davidson looked confused. "Tell them we're going to save the galaxy with technology that's 1,000 years old." Dr. Kane smiled for the first time in weeks. "The Vorthak Empire has conquered the galaxy by adapting to the most advanced weapons ever created. Let's see how they handle a good old-fashioned cannonball." Commander Sarah Blake felt her stomach twist as the combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler's gate. The Vorthak had been using this system as a staging area for attacks deeper into Alliance territory. Intelligence reports said at least 50 bioships were defending the area. "Contact," called Lieutenant Daniel Foster from the sensor station. "Multiple Vorthak vessels moving to intercept. Count is 63 enemy ships." Sarah looked around the bridge of the EAS Denver. Her crew was a mix of humans and Alliance members who had volunteered to serve on human vessels. They had trained together for 2 weeks, but this was their first real battle. "Signal from Admiral Murphy," reported the communications officer, a young Scythian named Kilvar. "All ships are to maintain formation until the enemy commits to attack." Through the viewports, Sarah could see the other ships in their battle group. Human destroyers with their crude-looking weapons sat alongside retrofitted Alliance vessels. Elegant Aeroxy Cloud Riders now carried missile pods instead of sonic disruptors. Crystalline Scythian ships bristled with railguns that looked completely out of place on their graceful hulls. "Enemy ships are approaching fast," Lieutenant Foster reported. "They're moving in the standard Vorthak swarm pattern." Sarah had studied every piece of footage from previous battles. The Vorthak always attacked the same way. They would rush forward in a coordinated swarm, absorb whatever weapons were fired at them, then systematically destroy every enemy ship. It had worked for 57 years. "Admiral Murphy is signaling," Kilvar announced. "All ships are to open fire when the enemy reaches optimal range. Use Pattern Alpha." Pattern Alpha was a human invention. Instead of focusing fire on the strongest targets, every ship would pick a different enemy and attack with completely different weapons. The goal was to force the bioships to adapt to as many different threats as possible at the same time. Enemy. "Ships entering optimal range in 30 seconds, Foster called out. Sarah gripped her command chair. "All weapons, prepare to fire. Remember, we don't want to destroy them quickly. We want to confuse them." The Vorthak bioships looked like nightmares come to life. Each one was unique, having adapted to different battles over the decades. Some had thick armor plating. Others had energy-absorbing surfaces. A few were covered in weapons they had stolen from defeated enemies. "Range achieved," Foster announced. "All ships are opening fire." The space around Kepler's gate exploded with weapons. Fire unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships launched simple chemical rockets that exploded in bright orange flashes. Retrofitted Alliance vessels fired solid projectiles at tremendous speeds. Some ships shot streams of metal pellets like giant shotguns. Sarah watched the main. Display as her own ship fired its primary weapon, a massive cannon that shot steel balls the size of cars. It was based on naval cannons from Earth's 18th century, scaled up for space combat. "Direct hit on target 7, reported the weapons officer. "Significant hull damage." But Sarah was watching the bioship's response, the alien vessels. Surface was rippling and changing as it tried to adapt to the steel projectile. She could see new armor growing where the cannonball had hit. Target 7 is adapting to kinetic impact, she announced to the fleet. All ships, switch to chemical explosives. The next wave of attacks was completely different. Instead of solid projectiles, the human ships fired shells filled with old-fashioned gunpowder. The explosions looked primitive compared to antimatter. Blasts, but they were working. The bioships are having trouble adapting, Dr. Kane reported from her science station. They keep adjusting for one type of attack, then getting hit by something completely different. Lieutenant Foster was tracking the battle on his sensors. The enemy ships are trying to coordinate their adaptation, but they can't keep up with our weapon variety. Sarah smiled grimly. Fire pattern beta. Time to really confuse them. Pattern beta was even more chaotic. Ships began firing everything they had in random order. Explosive shells mixed with solid shot. Chemical rockets followed, by railgun slugs. Some ships even fired old-fashioned ballistic missiles that used fuel and guidance systems from Earth's early space age. The Vorthak formation began to break apart. Bioships that had adapted to explosives were getting torn apart by kinetic weapons. Ships that had developed armor against projectiles were being destroyed by chemical warheads. Enemy Ship 14 is down, Foster reported. Enemy Ship 21 is venting atmosphere. Enemy Ship 7 is... Wait, what is it doing? On the display, one of the larger bioships had stopped trying to fight. Instead, it was rapidly changing shape. Its hull was growing new structures and weapon arrays at an incredible rate. It's trying to adapt to everything at once, Dr. Kane said with excitement. But look at the energy readings. The process is destabilizing the ship's biomatrix. The Vorthak vessel suddenly convulsed and exploded in a spectacular display of bioluminescent fire. The other bioships seemed to hesitate, as if they were reconsidering their tactics. "This is Admiral Murphy to all ships," came the voice over the communication system. "The enemy is breaking. All ships advance and continue firing. Don't give them time to regroup." The combined fleet moved forward aggressively. Human ships led the charge, their primitive weapons blazing. The retrofitted Alliance vessels followed, their crews finally understanding how to fight with chaos instead of precision. Sarah watched as a Scythian crystal ship fired what looked like a giant slingshot. The projectile was nothing more than a chunk of metal, but it punched through a bioship's hull like it was made of paper. The bioship tried to adapt, but before it could finish the process, an air oxide vessel hit it with a chemical explosive. "Commander Blake," called Lieutenant Foster, "we're receiving surrender signals from some of the enemy ships." Sarah stared at the sensor display. Several Vorthak bioships had stopped fighting and were broadcasting what looked like distress calls. In 57 years of war, no one had ever seen a Vorthak ship surrender. "Admiral Murphy is responding," Kilvar reported. "He's ordering the surrendering ships to be taken prisoner." The battle lasted another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Vorthak force was completely destroyed or captured. Alliance losses were minimal. For the first time since the war began, the good guys had won a major victory. Dr. Kane was studying the captured bioships when she made an important discovery. "Sarah, you need to see this. The bioships that surrendered have completely burned out their adaptation systems. They tried to adapt to too many different attacks and overloaded. Can they recover?" Sarah asked. "I don't think so. The biomatrix is permanently damaged. These ships are now completely vulnerable to any weapon." News of the victory at Kepler's. Gates spread through the galaxy faster than light. Refugee fleets that had been running for decades suddenly stopped and turned around. Worlds that had been preparing for invasion began planning liberation campaigns. Admiral Murphy called a fleet conference aboard the Montana. Representatives from every ship gathered in the main hangar bay. The mood was celebration mixed with determination. "This proves our strategy works," Admiral Murphy announced to the crowd. "But this was just one battle. The Vorthak Empire still controls most of the galaxy. We need to move fast before they figure out how to counter our tactics." Dr. Kane stepped forward with her analysis. The captured bioships contain detailed information about Vorthak technology and locations. We now know where their major bases are, including their central command facility. Colonel Davidson activated a holographic display showing the Vorthak Empire. Red dots marked their strongest positions, including a massive concentration near the galactic core. Intelligence suggests the Vorthak have a central adaptation matrix that coordinates their entire fleet, she explained. If we can destroy that facility, every bioship in the galaxy will lose its adaptive capabilities. Admiral Murphy looked at the display thoughtfully. "How heavily defended is this central facility?" "Very heavily," Colonel Davidson replied. "Thousands of bioships, all of their most advanced designs. It would be suicide for a conventional fleet." "Good thing we're not conventional anymore," Sarah said with a grin. The assembled officers and crew members began planning the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. They would strike at the heart of the Vorthak Empire with weapons that belonged in a museum. As the meeting broke up, Sarah found herself standing next to Dr. Kane at one of the viewports. Outside, damaged Vorthak bioships were being towed by Alliance vessels. The sight would have been impossible just weeks ago. "Think we can really win this war?" Sarah asked. Dr. Kane smiled. "We just beat the most advanced military force in the galaxy with gunpowder and steel balls. At this point, I think we can do anything." The alien delegates stared at the human ship with expressions that ranged from confusion to disbelief. Admiral Zektar had seen many strange vessels in his long career, but nothing like the EAS Montana. The human ship looked primitive compared to the elegant curves and energy arrays of Alliance vessels. Its hull was covered with what appeared to be ancient projectile weapons. Massive cannons jutted out like the spines of some metal beast. Strange pods hung from its sides like oversized bullets. "Are those kinetic weapons?" asked Ambassador Krillin, her crystal body flickering with uncertainty. Admiral Jake Murphy, now wearing the uniform of Earth's first galactic ambassador, nodded calmly. Railguns, mass drivers, and good old-fashioned chemical cannons, plus a few surprises. The meeting was taking place aboard Nexus Prime Station, but this time the mood was different. 3 days ago, these beings had been preparing for extinction. The arrival of the humans had given them something they thought was lost forever: hope. Dr. Lisa Kane activated a holographic display that showed the Montana's weapon systems. "We know this looks strange to you. Your ships have been using energy, weapons, and exotic matter for thousands of years. But we think that's exactly why the Vorthak have been winning." Hive Mind Collective Unit 7 spoke in its unified voice. "Explain how primitive weapons could succeed where our most advanced technology has failed." "Because they're not designed to be adapted to," Admiral Murphy replied. "Dr. Kane, show them the test footage." The hologram changed to show a captured Vorthak bioship floating in space. It was one of the smaller ones, about the size of a human destroyer. Its surface rippled with living armor and sensor arrays. "We managed to acquire this ship from a battlefield near Wolf 359, Dr. Kane explained. "We tested various weapons against it while the bioship was dormant." The first test showed energy weapons. Plasma beams, laser cannons, and particle accelerators all struck the bioship. Each time, the vessel's surface changed to absorb or deflect the attack. Within minutes, the ship was completely immune. "Now watch this," said Dr. Kane. The second test showed something completely different. A simple tungsten rod fired from a railgun at tremendous speed. The metal projectile punched through the bioship's hull like it was paper. The ship tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. It was just metal moving very fast. The adaptation system failed because there was no complex science to analyze, Admiral Murphy explained. Just basic kinetic energy and solid matter. Commander Veltar floated closer to the display. "But surely the bioship can develop armor against physical projectiles." "It can, and it did," Dr. Kane replied. "But look what happened next. The test continued with more kinetic weapons. Each projectile was slightly different. Some were steel, some were tungsten, some were ceramic, some were solid, some were explosive, some were designed to fragment on impact. By the time the bioship adapted to one type, 3 more types had already hit it. The beautiful thing about simple weapons is that there are infinite variations, Admiral Murphy said. We can fire rocks, metal bars, explosive shells, chemical, warheads, incendiary rounds, armor-piercing bullets, and anything else we can think of. Each one is different enough that the bioship has to adapt separately." Ambassador Krillin's crystal body brightened with excitement. "And while it's adapting to each weapon type, we hit it with more weapons it hasn't adapted to yet," finished Dr. Kane. "The key is overwhelming the adaptation system with more variety than it can handle." The alien delegates began talking among themselves in dozens of languages. The excitement in the room was obvious. For the first time in decades, they were discussing victory instead of survival. "But we need your help," Admiral Murphy continued. "Human ships alone aren't enough to defeat the entire Vorthak Empire. We need every Alliance vessel retrofitted with human weapon systems." Dr. Yilma, the galaxy's leading expert on adaptive technology, studied the weapon specifications. "This will require completely rebuilding our ships, removing energy weapon arrays, and installing these kinetic systems." "We brought construction ships and technical crews," Admiral Murphy said. "We can start the retrofitting process immediately. But we need your people to learn how to use these weapons." Colonel Amy Davidson stepped forward. She had been promoted after her insights about primitive weapons proved correct. "The tactics are as important as the technology. You've been fighting, logically and efficiently. We need to teach you to fight chaotically and unpredictably." "Chaotically?" Hive Mind Collective Unit 7 seemed confused. "How does chaos help in battle?" "Because the Vorthak adaptation system tries to predict your next move based on logical combat algorithms," Colonel Davidson explained. "If you do something unexpected, something that doesn't make tactical sense, it can't adapt quickly enough." She activated another display showing human combat footage from various wars throughout history. "We call it the human factor. Sometimes we charge when we should retreat. Sometimes we use the wrong weapon for the job. Sometimes we do something so crazy that it works purely by accident." Admiral Zektar watched the footage with fascination. Human soldiers doing things that made no logical sense, but somehow winning battles against superior forces. "You fight with intuition instead of calculation." "We fight with both," Admiral Murphy corrected. "But when intuition conflicts with logic, we follow our instincts. It makes us unpredictable." The first retrofit began immediately. A Scythian crystal. Ship was chosen for the prototype conversion. Human engineers swarmed over the elegant vessel, installing massive kinetic cannons where energy arrays had been. The work was crude compared to alien standards, but it was effective. Captain Ryan Brooks supervised the weapons testing from the Montana's bridge. Target practice begins in 1 hour. Let's see if crystals can learn to shoot bullets. The test went better than anyone expected. The Scythian crew adapted quickly to their new weapons. Their crystalline nature actually helped them calculate ballistic trajectories with surprising accuracy. "This might actually work," Colonel Davidson told Admiral Murphy privately. "It has to work," he replied, watching more Alliance ships arriving, "for retrofit. Because if it doesn't, we've just revealed humanity to an entire galaxy for nothing." News of the human solution spread quickly through what remained of the free galaxy. Ships arrived at Nexus Prime from every surviving world. Engineers worked around the clock to install kinetic weapons on vessels that had never fired anything more primitive than a photon torpedo. Dr. Kane found herself teaching alien scientists about metallurgy, chemistry, and ballistics. Concepts that seemed impossibly basic to her were revolutionary to beings who had been using pure energy for millennia. "Remember," she told a group of Aeroxy engineers, "we're not trying to build the perfect weapon. We're trying to build lots of different weapons that all work in slightly different ways. Variety beats perfection." Within 2 weeks, the first mixed human-alien fleet was ready for combat testing. Admiral Murphy stood on the bridge of the Montana, surrounded by communication officers coordinating with dozens of species. Outside the viewports, ships that looked like museum pieces bristled with ancient Earth weapons. "All ships report ready," announced Lieutenant Tom Harris. Admiral Murphy opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Murphy to all vessels. Today we find out if the galaxy can be saved with rocks and sticks. All ships, prepare for the first counterattack against the Vorthak Empire." The fleet began moving toward Vorthak space. For the first time in 57 years, Alliance forces were advancing instead of retreating. Lieutenant Daniel Foster had never imagined he would be disguised as a Vorthak bioship pilot. The stolen vessel around him pulsed with alien life, its walls breathing like the inside of some massive creature. Beside him, the shape-shifting alien. Spy Mordak had taken the form of a Vorthak technician. "Remind me why we volunteered for this mission?" Daniel whispered as they approached the security checkpoint near the galactic core. Mordak's stolen features shifted slightly in what might have been a smile. "Because someone needs to find the central adaptation matrix, and we're the only ones stupid enough to try." The plan was insane by any reasonable standard. While the main Alliance fleets kept the Vorthak distracted with battles across the galaxy, a small team would infiltrate the enemy's most secure facility. Their goal was to locate and mark the central adaptation matrix for destruction. "Incoming transmission from Vorthak Control," reported the bioship's communication system. The voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. Daniel activated the response system they had programmed during their 3-week journey. "Bioship designation Kralmoth returning from Combat Zone 7, requesting docking clearance." "Kralmoth, you are early. Combat operations in Zone 7 are not scheduled to conclude for another 6 days. Daniel's heart pounded, but Mordak remained calm. The alien spy activated their cover story. "Heavy damage sustained from primitive kinetic weapons. Adaptation matrix overloaded, requesting immediate maintenance." There was a pause that seemed to last forever. Then the control voice returned. "Proceed to Maintenance Dock 7. Report to biomatrix recalibration immediately." The bioship moved toward the massive Vorthak facility that hung in space like a metal cancer. Daniel had seen the intelligence reports, but seeing it in person was terrifying. The structure was larger than most moons, covered with docking bays. For thousands of bioships, energy conduits pulsed across its surface like veins. "That's the biggest space station I've ever seen," Daniel muttered. "It's not a station," Mordak corrected. "It's a living organism. The entire facility is one massive bioship that serves as the central nervous system for their fleet." As they approached the docking bay, Daniel could see other bioships arriving and departing. Many showed signs of recent battle damage. The Alliance's new tactics were clearly taking a toll on the Vorthak forces. "Docking in 30 seconds, announced the bioship's systems. "Prepare for umbilical connection." Daniel felt the ship shudder as mechanical tentacles latched onto their hull. A breathing tube connected to their airlock, and suddenly they could hear the sounds of the massive facility around them. It was like being inside a living creature's stomach. "Remember the mission," Mordak said, as they prepared to leave the ship. "Find the central adaptation matrix, plant the beacon, get out alive." "What if we can't get out alive?" Daniel asked. "Then make sure the beacon transmits before we die." They stepped into a corridor that looked like the inside of a blood vessel. The walls were organic, pulsing with internal light. Other Vorthak moved through the passages, all looking identical to their biomechanical forms. Daniel was grateful for Mordak's shape-shifting abilities. "Bioship Kralmoth crew report to recalibration chamber 9, announced a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves. They followed signs written in the flowing script of the Vorthak language. Daniel had spent weeks learning to read it, though he still found it disturbing. The letters seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Recalibration Chamber 9 was a massive room filled with bioships in various stages of repair. Technicians swarmed over damaged vessels, replacing burned-out adaptation cells and growing new armor plating. The sight was both fascinating and horrifying. "State your malfunction," demanded a supervisor who looked like a cross between a machine and a spider. Mordak stepped forward confidently. "Adaptation matrix overload during engagement with primitive kinetic weapons, unable to process simple projectile attacks." The supervisor's multiple eyes focused on them with interest. "Primitive kinetic weapons? We have received reports of this new Alliance tactic. Come, you will provide data for analysis." They were led deeper into the facility, through chambers that grew stranger and more alien with each step. Daniel saw rooms where bioships were being grown from seed pods, laboratories where captured Alliance technology was being studied and copied, training areas where new Vorthak warriors were being created. "The central adaptation matrix is in the core chamber," the supervisor explained as they walked. "All bioship experiences are processed there and distributed to the fleet. Your encounter data will help us develop countermeasures." Daniel and Mordak exchanged glances. They were being taken exactly where they needed to go. The core chamber was beyond anything Daniel had imagined. It was a spherical room hundreds of meters across, filled with organic computers that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Streams of data flowed through tubes that looked like arteries. At the center was a massive brain-like structure that had to be the central adaptation matrix. "My God," Daniel whispered. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." Hundreds of Vorthak technicians worked throughout the chamber, monitoring data streams and adjusting biomatrix parameters. Daniel could see information from thousands of bioships being processed simultaneously. Every battle, every weapon encounter, every tactical decision was being analyzed and shared with the entire fleet. Place your ship's memory core in the analysis slot, the supervisor instructed, indicating a biomechanical interface. Mordak produced the fake memory core they had prepared. It contained carefully crafted false data about their supposed encounter with Alliance forces. More importantly, it contained the beacon that would mark this location for the coming attack. As the memory core was inserted into the analysis slot, Daniel watched streams of false information flow into the central matrix. Mixed with the real data was the beacon signal, disguised as routine combat information. "Analysis complete," announced the supervisor. "Your encounter data has been integrated into the fleet database. Return to your ship for repairs." They were escorted back through the facility, past the growing chambers and repair bays. Daniel tried to memorize everything he saw. The intelligence value of this mission was incredible, even beyond the primary objective. Back at their bioship, they went through the motions of receiving repairs while secretly preparing for escape. Their ship's organic systems were partially healed by Vorthak technicians who had no idea they were helping Alliance spies. "How long before the beacon activates?" Daniel asked quietly. 6 hours, Mordak replied. "Enough time for us to get clear, and for the attack fleet to reach jumping distance." They launched from the facility without incident. The bioship's stolen identity held up perfectly. As they moved away from the massive structure, Daniel activated their hidden communication system. "Control, this is Infiltration Team Alpha. Mission accomplished. The beacon is in place." Admiral Murphy's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Alpha. Can you confirm the target location?" "Confirmed. The central adaptation matrix is in the core chamber, exactly where intelligence predicted. But, Admiral, this place is huge. It's going to take everything we have to destroy it." "Leave that to us, Lieutenant. Just get yourselves to the extraction point." As their bioship jumped to hyperspace, Daniel looked back at the Vorthak facility one last time. In a few hours, the largest Alliance fleet ever assembled would arrive to attack that position. They would be using the most primitive weapons in their arsenal against the most advanced target in the galaxy. "Think they can really destroy that thing?" he asked Mordak. The alien spy had returned to his natural form, which looked like liquid metal given shape. "I have learned not to underestimate human ingenuity. You defeated the Vorthak with rocks and explosives. Destroying their central facility should be easy by comparison." Daniel wasn't so sure, but he had done his part. The beacon was in place. The target was marked. Now it was up to Captain Brooks and his strike force to finish the job. "Control, this is Alpha Team. We're clear of the target zone. Beginning transit to Rally Point 7. "Copy that, Alpha. Welcome home." As their ship raced through hyperspace toward safety, Daniel wondered if he would live to see the outcome of the mission. Behind them, hidden in the heart of the Vorthak facility, a small beacon waited to guide the Alliance fleet to its target. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in the next few hours. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the EAS Defiance and watched the most primitive fleet in galactic history prepare for the most important battle ever fought. 50 ships hung in space around him, each one equipped with weapons that belonged in a museum. "Signal from the beacon is strong and clear," reported Lieutenant Tom Harris. "Target confirmed at coordinates 077, Mark 42. Ryan looked at the tactical display showing the Vorthak facility. The massive biostructure was surrounded by defensive positions and patrol ships. Intelligence estimated over 3,000 bioships were guarding the central adaptation matrix. "Remember the plan," Ryan announced to his strike force. "We're not trying to fight their entire fleet. We punch through their defenses, hit the core facility, and get out before they can organize a counterattack. Dr. Lisa Kane was monitoring the weapon systems from her science station. All ships report. Ready. Kinetic weapons loaded, chemical explosives armed, incendiary devices prepared. The strike force was carrying the most basic arsenal imaginable. No energy weapons, no exotic matter, no quantum disruptors. Just steel projectiles, chemical explosives, and incendiary charges. The kind of weapons humans had been using for centuries. "This is Admiral Murphy," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "Strike Force Alpha, you are cleared for attack. The main fleet will keep their reinforcements busy. You have exactly 90 minutes before we have to withdraw." Ryan opened a channel to all ships in his command. "This is it, people. Today we find out if the galaxy can be saved with fire and steel. All ships jump to attack coordinates. Space twisted around them as 50 ships entered hyperspace simultaneously. The jump was short, just a few light years, but it would bring them directly into the heart of Vorthak territory. They emerged from hyperspace in the middle of chaos. The Vorthak defensive fleet was already moving to intercept them, alerted by sensors they couldn't hide from. Bioships of every size and configuration swarmed toward the human formation. "Multiple contacts," called Lieutenant Harris. "I count over 400 enemy vessels in intercept course. All ships, attack pattern." "Delta," Ryan ordered. "Hit everything that moves with everything we've got." The battle began with a thunderous roar of primitive weapons. Human ships fired massive kinetic cannons that launched steel projectiles the size of cars. Chemical rockets exploded in brilliant flashes of orange and red. Some ships used weapons, so simple they were essentially giant slingshots shooting chunks of metal. The Vorthak bioships tried to adapt, but they were overwhelmed by the variety of attacks. Just as one ship developed armor against kinetic projectiles, it was hit by chemical explosives. When another adapted to explosives, it was destroyed by incendiary weapons that set its biohull on fire. "We're breaking through their outer perimeter," reported the weapons officer. "Path to target is clear." But Ryan could see more bioships moving to block their advance. The Vorthak were sacrificing their outer defenses to protect the central facility. "All ships, maximum acceleration. We need to reach the target before they can regroup." The strike force punched through the Vorthak lines like an ancient battering ram. Ships on both sides exploded in brilliant fireballs, but the humans kept pushing forward. Their primitive weapons were devastating the bioships that had never faced such basic attacks. Sergeant Rebecca Stone led the Marine assault teams aboard the transport ship EAS Normandy. Her soldiers were equipped with the most basic weapons imaginable: flamethrowers, shotguns, explosive charges, and in some cases literal swords and axes. "Remember your training," she told her troops as they prepared for boarding. "These bioships can adapt to energy weapons, but they've never seen a good old-fashioned fire axe." The Normandy docked with the outer hull of the massive Vorthak facility. Stone and her Marines cut through the biometal walls using simple thermite charges. The sound of metal burning filled the air as they forced their way inside. The corridors of the facility were filled with Vorthak defenders, but they were completely unprepared for human tactics. Their biomechanical bodies could adapt to energy weapons and exotic attacks, but they had no defense against Marines charging at them with flamethrowers and shotguns. "Adapt to this," Stone shouted as she emptied her shotgun into a group of Vorthak warriors. The simple chemical explosions and metal pellets tore through their adaptive armor like paper. Meanwhile, Dr. Kane and the alien technician Veltar raced through the facility toward the central adaptation matrix. They carried satchels full of the most primitive explosive devices ever used in space, simple chemical bombs made from fertilizer and diesel fuel. "The core chamber is just ahead," Veltar wheezed through his breathing apparatus. "But the defenses are extremely heavy." They emerged into the massive spherical chamber that housed the central adaptation matrix. The brain-like structure pulsed with bioluminescent activity as it processed data from thousands of bioships across the galaxy. Vorthak technicians worked frantically to coordinate the fleet's response to the human attack. "There," Dr. Kane pointed to the base of the central matrix. "If we can place charges there, the explosion should destroy the entire system." But dozens of Vorthak guards stood between them and their target. The alien warriors raised biomechanical weapons that could have vaporized energy-shielded troops in seconds. That's when Captain Brooks arrived with his assault team. The humans charged into the chamber, firing chemical weapons and throwing explosive grenades. The Vorthak tried to adapt to the attacks, but there was nothing to adapt to except basic chemistry and physics. "Cover Kane and Veltar!" Brooks shouted as he fired his flamethrower at a group of Vorthak defenders. "They need to reach the central matrix." The battle in the core chamber was chaos. Humans fought biomechanical aliens with weapons that should have been obsolete. Flamethrowers roared against adaptive armor. Explosive charges detonated against living walls. Simple steel blades cut through technology that could deflect antimatter beams. Dr. Kane reached the base of the central matrix and began placing her charges. The simple chemical explosives looked ridiculously primitive next to the advanced biotechnology around them, but she knew they would work precisely because they were so basic. "Charges are set," she called out. "Everyone clear the area." The retreat was as chaotic as the attack. Human Marines fought their way back through corridors filled with confused Vorthak defenders. The bioships outside were losing coordination as their central guidance system began to fail. "All teams, evacuate immediately," Brooks ordered. "Detonation in 60 seconds." Sergeant Stone and her Marines reached their ships just as the explosives detonated. The sound was muffled by the vacuum of space, but the flash was visible for light years. The massive Vorthak facility convulsed as its central nervous system was destroyed by simple chemical reactions. "Target destroyed," reported Lieutenant Harris, with amazement. "The central adaptation matrix is gone, but the real proof came from the Vorthak fleet around them." Suddenly, bioships that had been adapting to human weapons began taking damage again. Their adaptive systems had been cut off from the central coordination network. "All ships, general attack," Ryan ordered. "Hit them while they're confused." The battle turned into a rout. Vorthak bioships that had been nearly invulnerable were now taking damage from every attack. Their individual adaptation systems couldn't keep up without central coordination. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for decades were being destroyed by weapons their great-grandparents might have recognized. "Strike Force Alpha to Admiral Murphy," Ryan reported. "Mission accomplished. The central adaptation matrix has been destroyed. Repeat, the target is neutralized." Admiral Murphy's voice crackled with emotion over the communication system. "Outstanding work, Captain. All fleet units, begin general advance. Today we take back the galaxy." Across thousands of star systems, the news spread faster than light. The Vorthak Empire's greatest advantage had been eliminated by humans using fire and steel. Bioships that had seemed invincible were suddenly vulnerable to conventional weapons. As the strike force returned to Alliance space, Dr. Kane stood at the viewport watching the distant explosions where the Vorthak facility had been. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy had been destroyed by chemical explosives that any human teenager could have made in a garage. "Think they'll surrender now?" asked Captain Brooks. "I think they're going to learn what humans have always known," Dr. Kane replied. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Behind them, the Vorthak Empire began its first retreat in over 50 years. Admiral Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of the space station orbiting Earth and watched ships from hundreds of worlds approach for the liberation ceremony. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Central Adaptation Matrix, and the galaxy was finally at peace. The war had ended faster than anyone expected. Once the Vorthak bioships lost their central coordination, they became vulnerable to conventional weapons. Alliance fleets equipped with human kinetic weapons had swept through Vorthak space, liberating system after system. The bioships that had once seemed invincible were no match for simple projectiles and chemical explosives. "Final count is in," reported Dr. Lisa Kane as she joined him at the viewport. "Representatives from 437 worlds are here for the ceremony, including 12 Vorthak delegations." Jake nodded with satisfaction. The Vorthak surrender had been as surprising as their defeat. Once their adaptation network was destroyed, many bioships had simply stopped fighting. It turned out that individual Vorthak were not naturally aggressive. They had been controlled by the central matrix that was now gone. "President Torres is ready to begin the welcome ceremony," announced Lieutenant Tom Harris. "Earth's first official contact with galactic civilization." The ceremony took place in the largest auditorium on the space station. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that no human had ever imagined. At the center sat the leaders who had fought together to save the galaxy. Admiral Zektar rose to speak first. The four-armed alien leader looked very different from the defeated being Jake had first met through subspace communications. His bearing was proud and confident again. "6 months ago, my people faced extinction," he began. "The Vorthak Empire had conquered most of known space with technology we could not defeat. We sent a desperate message into the darkness hoping someone, anyone, might help us." He gestured toward the human delegation. "What we found was a species that saved us with weapons our ancestors might have used. They taught us that sometimes the simplest solution is the right solution. Sometimes moving backward is the only way to move forward." Ambassador Krillin stood next, her crystalline body shining with gratitude. "The humans showed us that advance does not always mean better. Their primitive weapons succeeded where our most sophisticated technology failed. They proved that ingenuity matters more than efficiency." President Helen Torres rose to address the assembly. This was the moment that would officially bring humanity into galactic civilization. 2 centuries of hiding were finally over. "We are honored to join this community of worlds," she said. "Humanity has always believed that diversity makes us stronger. Today we see that principle proven on a galactic scale. Together, we can overcome any challenge." The formal ceremonies continued for hours, but Jake found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the desperate message that had first reached Earth, the debates about whether to reveal humanity, the primitive, weapons that had saved the galaxy. Captain Ryan Brooks found him after the ceremonies ended. The man who had led the final assault on the Vorthak facility looked tired but happy. "Strange to think it's really over," he said. "The war is over," Jake agreed. "But I think our real adventure is just beginning." Through the viewport, they could see ships preparing for the first joint exploration mission in galactic history. Human vessels would work alongside alien ships to explore the unknown regions beyond current space. the technology sharing agreements, would advance human science by centuries. Dr. Kane joined them with a data pad full of reports. The final analysis of Vorthak technology is complete. It's fascinating stuff. Their bioships were incredibly advanced, but they had a fatal flaw. Which was? Asked Brooks. They were too smart for their own good. The adaptation system was so sophisticated that it couldn't handle simple attacks. It was like using a supercomputer to solve basic math problems. The computer kept looking for complex patterns that didn't exist. Jake laughed. So we defeated the most advanced military force in the galaxy because their technology was too good. Essentially, yes. They optimized for fighting other advanced civilizations. They never considered that someone might attack them with gunpowder and steel. Colonel Amy Davidson approached their group with news from the former Vorthak territories. Latest reports from the liberation zones are positive. Most Vorthak settlements are adapting well to peaceful coexistence. Without the central matrix controlling them, they're actually quite reasonable. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The fearsome Vorthak Empire had been controlled by the same technology that made them militarily invincible. Once that technology was destroyed, the individual Vorthak revealed themselves to be no more aggressive than any other species. Any word from the deep exploration teams? Jake asked. Commander Foster's team found 3 new civilizations in the Outer Rim, Davidson reported. All of them are eager to join the Alliance. Apparently, word of our victory has spread faster than our ships. Sergeant Rebecca Stone arrived with a bottle of champagne and a grin. Her Marines had become legends throughout the galaxy for their assault on the Vorthak facility. Stories of humans fighting biomechanical aliens with swords and flamethrowers were already becoming part of galactic folklore. Time to celebrate, she announced. We just saved the galaxy with weapons my grandfather would have recognized. As they shared the champagne, Jake reflected on the lessons of their victory. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been saved by the most primitive weapons imaginable. Superior technology had been defeated by simple ingenuity. A species that had hidden in the shadows for 2 centuries had emerged to lead the greatest military victory in galactic history. What's next for humanity? Asked Brooks. Everything, Jake replied. We've got a whole galaxy to explore, new worlds to visit, new species to meet, new problems to solve with old solutions. Dr. Kane was already studying reports from the exploration teams. There are so many mysteries out there. Ancient ruins on dead worlds, energy signals from beyond the galactic rim, civilizations that predate everything we know. Think we'll need any more primitive weapons? Asked Stone with a smile. Probably, Jake replied. Every time we think we've seen the most advanced technology possible, something new comes along. It's good to know that sometimes a rock thrown hard enough can change everything. Outside the viewport, the stars shined brighter than they had in decades. The red markers that had once covered the galaxy maps were gone, replaced by the blue symbols of free worlds. Trade routes that had been closed for 50 years were reopening. Families separated by war were being reunited. The Galactic Alliance had not just survived, it had grown stronger. The addition of human unpredictability and primitive weapons had given them new ways to solve old problems. Future enemies would find it much harder to adapt to an alliance that could attack with antimatter missiles and flintlock pistols in the same battle. You know what the best part is? Asked Dr. Kane as she watched ships from dozens of worlds working together outside. What's that? Jake replied. We proved that there's no such thing as obsolete knowledge. Everything we've learned, every technique we've developed, Every weapon we've created might be useful someday. Even the most primitive technology can save the most advanced civilization." As the celebration continued around them, Jake looked out at the galaxy humanity had helped save. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, and probably new enemies who thought they were invincible. But the galaxy was ready for them now. After all, they had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right solution. Sometimes moving backward is the only way to move forward. And sometimes a rock thrown hard enough can change everything. The stars had hope again, delivered by the species that had saved them all with fire and steel.